whacking the city of Dallas into Richardson and Garland. And if you look at those cities, I was joking before we went live with the Chiefs. I don't think there's a farm. I mean, we're talking an urban, big time urban setting, um, and there's a lot of folks out there that prepare for things. There's some that don't do as good a job preparing. We'll talk about that as well. But we wanted to get the three gentlemen we got on today just to talk about what happened. Plus, also kind of hit on Kelly about with Garland with the tornado that hit a couple years ago that was in December that killed. I mean, December killed people. So who we've got for our guest today, and we want to throw a little shout out to Chief Mark Lee from Garland. I posted Mark was supposed to be with us. Mark had a little family emergency pop up, so want to send our thoughts to Mark. Mark's a great guy and a great boss. But we've got one of his assistant chiefs, Kelly Miller, with us from Garland, Texas. Assistant Chief, again, Chief Curtis Poovey from the Richardson, Texas Fire Department, and Executive Deputy Chief Charlie Salazar from Dallas Fire and Rescue. And again, if you pulled up a map right now and you saw the Dallas Fourth Metroplex, if you looked at Dallas, if like I say, you drew that line, you're going Dallas. In fact, you really can't tell where Dallas and Richardson and Garland all stop and end. It's all like one big, they're all doing high rises and again, a lot of houses, a lot of shopping, urban setting. But welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. Yeah. And one of the things I guess we wanted to start off with is, and I guess let's do this. Let's go backwards first. Kelly from Garland. Let's go backwards just a little bit because we're going to want to talk about preparedness. And Chief Salazar said they just had, an after action with what happened there too as well with their OEM and that. We're talking. Was it 2 years ago? When was it? December 3? How long? 4?
Well, actually, it was December 26, 2015. The day after.
2015. Seems like yesterday. So that we're talking December, and storms pop up in Dallas in December. And you guys had some fatalities, flipped some cars over, I think, at 635. And
it was actually at 190 in LBJ. We had 8 fatalities in cars. The tornado went from the southern part of Garland on the northern pattern and went across Lake Ray Hubbard, which is to the east of Dallas, and then proceeded up through Rowlett. It was EF4. It passed through Garland, and as it went over the lake, went to an EF3 in city of Rowlett.
Well, I know Rowlett got whacked a little bit with everybody. And again, I know I've said this before. I know anytime we see anything coming from Granbury, Burleson, all that, it's like I know you guys are all 3 of you are putting your helmets on because the way everything runs with the tornadoes. Curtis, you guys, I know again, very much an urban setting. High rises. Obviously residential and all the shopping, but I mean. You guys you've had some damage too in the past and most recently, right?
Just this event, nothing really to play in the past.
Well, and again, we're talking about, everybody being prepared ahead of time and then reacting to it. And it's kind of like the hurricanes. I was just in Palm Beach County, and Palm Beach County, Florida has one of the chiefs there have one of the best response plans, especially for hurricanes. They've had it for decades where, because we all know the hurricanes you can plan, and there's a whole section on taking care of the first responders' families first, so the guys don't have to worry about what's going on at home. But now we're talking, and I know not all the men and women with Dallas, Richardson, and Garland live in the cities they protect, but there are a lot that do, and we're talking, Charlie, about. You guys, this last event, you had one of your stations was destroyed pretty much. We're talking families that are this isn't a hurricane. We have time to prepare. This is all right, guys. Start the sirens. We think this is happening. Boom, boom, boom. And even with today's technology, it can creep up on you, right, Charlie?
Trying to hit my mute button there.
There you go.
Yeah. So one thing that I think caught some of the guys off guard was when your overhead door is going up and you're fixing to respond to a call and the tornado comes and it blows the entire roof right off of the fire station. So the guys were reporting that like they were watching the Cowboy game at halftime. Right after halftime, that's when this tornado came through, and the guys are on the radio saying that there's been a lot of damage across the street and that their fire station has been damaged. So no matter how much you prepare for emergencies, you don't prepare for you pulling out of a fire station and having that kind of emergency. And then what do you do then? So uh, the rest of us pretty much had to take up the slack, and that station was pretty much out of service, and so was the equipment there. They reported that they were fine, so we had to trust them by their word, and we had other issues to address, larger issues to address.
Hey, Chief Lasky. So I just want to throw out some numbers real quick so that anyone that didn't see the aftermath of this particular storm. So I think they ended up rating this storm as an EF3. That's putting winds at about 140 miles an hour. According to the assessments, this was a 15-mile track that this thing was actually on the ground. 32 minutes, I think, is the time that they've put it. And again, this stretched from the western borders of Dallas. And for those who aren't familiar with this area, it's a densely, Dallas is obviously a big city, and you get into Richardson and Garland, which are on the upper scale of probably medium-sized city, but this is all densely populated, majority of residential, a lot of storefronts, strip centers, obviously a fire station destroyed. So 32 minutes, and in this particular case, 3 cities, and this took place somewhere, Chief Salazar mentioned, around halftime of a Cowboy game, which everybody was already, feeling it was the Cowboys playing. So how much anxiety does that bring? But at any rate, a long storm that went through a very densely populated area was very significant. If you haven't seen the pictures, just the pictures alone, I think that was Dallas Fire Rescue Station 41. You ought to see the pictures of that station to give you an idea. It looks like the engine's out of there, Chief Salazar, but the truck was in it. But for those first responders listening to this, the pictures of that fire station alone should kind of make the hair on the back of your neck kind of stand up, because it's impressive.
Well, and again, I just spent like 4 days in Florida, where pretty much all their firehouses are hurricane proof with the doors and the windows, and it's big time hurricane proof. Well, we don't build stuff like that, and we don't expect it to come through. Now, Curtis, Chief Poovey, you guys, I guess I want to throw this to you because you guys were busy enough. You in Dallas, and Chief Salazar, I want you to throw this number out here in a little bit about the calls pending. Everybody was so busy with emergencies. Curtis, you in Dallas and Garland, all you guys, but I know you in Dallas do a lot of automatic and mutual. You do a lot of working together because you're right there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so what did you guys do through? This had to be taxing to you guys as well.
Yeah, it was. We had 30 to 40 runs holding, and Garland, Dallas, and Richardson all automatic aid each other. So we were constantly running into each other's cities and calling each other for mutual aid. And obviously at that time it was kind of Lone Ranger time because everyone and so you just had to kind of handle our own incidents without help for quite a while, because all of the southern cities that would normally be running together was tied up in their own city.
Well, and Chief, what you normally probably send a 1 alarm response to for a significant event, you're lucky with calls pending to get an engine there or a fire department representative, right? Something in a vehicle with red lights on it to give a size up and let people know what they have a particular call, right? Because everybody would seem like they were. That's what I was listening to. Is like, we got someone coming, meaning we have a unit coming, to see what the situation. That had to be tough as well.
It was. We were out of units in just a few minutes. So dispatch started prioritizing the calls, and we had just a ton of power lines down, trees in the houses, gas leaks, things like that. So they started taking anything life safety first, and then dividing and conquering that way. Put apparatus on both sides of the incident and just taking it. Then, of course, we were able to get some help from Plano and the northern and western cities fairly quickly, but it took some time. Once we got everybody down, we were able to clear the calls.
Well, I guess that's the one thing that's nice about a horrific event when it deals with a tornado. When you get, when we've done the hurricanes and other stuff, we're talking a massive area where, mainly with the tornadoes, we're talking that strip, like Terry said, that band, which is devastating enough. At least you could drag people in from different departments to come in. I know the past couple of hurricanes, like, so who are we going to call? Everybody's up to here with water and all that stuff. Charlie, Chief Salazar, you said, how many calls did you guys have pending at any particular moment?
Just to kind of give you a little bit of a background. So when we, of course, our chiefs respond to larger events. So when I saw the tornado coming, I called my assistant chief, Chief Ball, and I said, "Hey, did you hear there's a tornado on the ground in Dallas?" He goes, "Really? Well, stay in the house till it passes." I said, "Well, it's past me. It's headed your way." So what ended up happening, we showed up on location, but there was multiple companies out there. One deputy chief was on the west side, and we had another deputy chief on the east side. So the way we addressed it is we addressed it through area command, and we set up a west command and an east command, and then we ran kind of the operations nucleus as far as running incident command to coordinate such a large scale event. So getting into the mutual aid, we had 200 calls in queue that were still waiting, and every single one of our apparatuses was out of service because they were responding to calls. And with that, we wanted our command band in the very beginning, but we didn't have a company to bring it to us to provide shelter for us. And then mutual aid started playing in, so we also stood up OEM, and OEM was providing our mutual aid. They said, "Hey, you have so and so that's available. Can you use them?" I talked to our incident commander, Chief Ball. He said, "Yes." So we set up a command structure out in the field, which we had an incident commander, an operations chiefs, we had logistics, and we had a special ops. And that really, the biggest lesson learned out of this big, large scope event is set up your command structure, because it's hard to explain all the calls that we were responsible for, all the communication. We put one uh, chief on one radio and another chief on another radio. We asked dispatch to send us the runs so that we could kick out the runs from our location. And then OEM was providing additional information because they wanted to know the scope of the event. Well, when you first get out there at nighttime, you don't really know. And then they started plotting and telling us, how big our area was. So I don't know if that addresses some of your questions, or maybe it raises more questions, but that's how we kind of set up from the beginning.
I was kind of curious, and I'm interested from both sides of this. And Chief Miller, I kind of leave you maybe as an exception because your recent event a couple of years ago, and you guys were in the thick of it. But what I guess what always concerns me, and I count myself as one of these people, that you get this watch and warning kind of, you're lackadaisical about it, because we get a bunch of them around here, especially in May. There's hardly a day goes by that you're not getting a watch or a warning. So I'm sure everyone does the same thing, which is you pull out your phone, look at your computer, pull up some kind of a radar app. You see something significant, you kind of watch it, and then but 99% of the times it fizzles out, and you've got a little bit of wind, maybe a little bit of hail, some high rain, whatever. In this particular case, and I think the words of catching people off guard, because that was number one, that's out of season for us. We all expect this in April and May. So was the one in December. But through the incident in December, through this incident here, I know for myself, I have a little bit of a heightened level of attention given to the warnings and the watches. But we still don't even stand up a full-blown EOC or an EOC that can operate this event. It still takes us a while to activate that. I know. What do you think the time frame was, Chief Salazar, for you, and maybe Chief Poovey, before you realized the significance of what you had, and before you were operational from that command standpoint, at EOC standpoint?
I'll say that for Dallas, and I'll also say that our Office of Emergency Management does a good job of putting out forecasts ahead of time. And I don't know if you guys were paying attention to the forecast that day. They had predicted, some strong storms, but as the weather progressed that day, because they give that maybe a day in advance, but so that puts us on alert to kind of pay attention to it. So I was watching the weather from the house, and they actually drew the line lower than anticipated. And so it was
Yeah.
supposed to be kind of north of Dallas, where they drew that line further south. And so I was kind of keeping an eye on it. But when we initially got the tornado response, it took us about an hour to stand up the EOC because everybody, I mean, this is on everybody's home, and there's nobody at work, and a lot of people live outside the city of Dallas. So people just started communicating and coming in, and the Office of Emergency Management, they have their communications and they talk to their people. They bring their people in, they stand up their group. The police come in, the fire people come in. So we actually had three chiefs that were, including a chief artist, our fire chief, that was headed straight into OEM. So we do have a process in place. If something big happens, those alerts go out, people get notified, and they come in. Generally, somebody from OEM can get there pretty quick within the hour, but I think within an hour we had our EOC stood up.
And your OEM folks are at City Hall downtown.
They are, but of course, when it's a weekend or after hours, they're not there, and
Right.
they weren't.
But that's
They
where they're
weren't.
headed. That's where they
Yes,
set it up. Yeah.
yes, sir.
What about, hey, Chief Miller, what about your experience in Garland? At what point, what point did you guys spool up and then make that an operational?
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, we're kind of hyper vigilant now. The old it can't happen here. Well, it's happened twice now in the last since 2016. We were probably less than 30 minutes. Once we saw what was going on in Dallas and saw the path, we were already making phone calls to stand up full EOC, and we did it in 30 minutes or less. Which getting as far ahead as you can of building a command structure, just like Charlie said, that is absolutely key to managing an incident. To get everybody in the right places, the incident command structure is paramount as far as accountability purposes go, and doing a lot of the tasks and things that Charlie said they did during their experience with the staging, dispatching from a location. It it's unfortunate that it takes a catastrophe for a city to realize that there's catastrophes that are bigger than any one area or location, and we're such an urbanized and the metropolitan area that there is an interreliability of all of us to help each other. And this event just proves that out, that there's opportunity for us to work together more closely, to work on interoperability, to work on those features where we can provide the greatest assistance needed as quick as we can, even if it's just a chief officer going to another city to help undergird a command structure, which is part of a project we started after the 2016 storm through the North Central Texas Council of Governments.
Well, and I want to throw this, Chief Poovey. I know we were going to talk about how the timing for getting your EOC going, but let's go back in time here when we start talking, especially after 9/11, the 9/11, about interoperability and everybody able to talk to each other and so on and so forth. Remember, Curtis? It was almost like people were like, yeah, and it wasn't as big. We'll just switch, or we'll. I remember having to carry two different radios. I remember Charlie with being able to talk to Dallas. It was like this, and everybody had these contraptions come out. If you plug a radio into here, we'll be able to all this nonsense that I think we've come a long way, Curtis, where we should be with interoperability with radios, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But how important did that play, and be able to talk to everybody?
It was huge. The cities right around us, we're all pretty well click and talk on our radios. We have Garland has us, Plano, we're back and forth, things like that. About half the mutual aid companies that came in to us were interoperable just with what they had coming in, but the other half wasn't. So that meant bringing them to the EOC, giving them radios, and then deploying them out. And of course, then you have to deal with getting all the radios back. And after that, it was so smooth with all the apparatus that could just change talk groups, and boom, we're talking. That was seamless, and it worked great. The ones that didn't have it, it worked once we got them radios, but then you're only giving them one, per apparatus. Right. Back like we were talking before the show about, you have one radio on that talk group versus every person or every firefighter having a radio. So you have those problems, but I think it's critical. We've got to work on this interoperability. If it's the interop plans where you have interop channels where everyone goes to that one channel, or you have each other's channels, whatever the case is, it's critical, and we proved that on this event.
Well, and how important, I'll throw this to all you guys. Terry and I talk about this all the time. Um, you know, the planning ahead is huge, and it's kind of funny because when me and my buddy John Salka teach, he calls it the takeout menu. There's so many departments that still don't have run cards. There's so many departments that don't have built-in. I know, Terry, when we got to Louisville, it was like, there was a point where, a lot of departments around us, it was like whoever was riding the front seat determined who was responding on the extra alarms. And it wasn't like, give me a second alarm and I can go back to doing what I got to do. Terry, kind of like the Signal 99 for Maydays, and we ripped off that idea from New York City. After 9/11, they have a 1066 policy, which if there's a Mayday, all they have to do is 18 the Bronx 1066, and like Signal 99, Terry, Louisville, it automatically for a Mayday automatically elevates the alarm to the next alarm wherever you're at. Specials, extra truck companies, extra chiefs, extra ambulances, and other airline unit, and asks you to ascertain if command needs the collapse rescue unit. There was a lot of people, that did really, like I said, you had to get the takeout menu. I'll have 3 of these, 4 of those, and it changed from days. So again, how important, guys, is it? And I've always bragged in the Metroplex. I'm sorry to anyone else. I know there's some great places out there. California has, obviously, the West Coast has the Mutual and Automatic with the wildlands down. Florida with the tornadoes. But I'm telling you, Texas, especially the Metroplex, they do a damn good job when it comes to. I think we've come so far. If you look at how disjointed we were years ago, to really, I mean, it's nothing's perfect. Don't get me wrong, but I guess the emphasis, and I'll throw this to Charlie, Curtis, or Kelly, either one of you. Charlie, maybe first. How important is it for everybody? I guess let me throw this out there: the Chiefs meetings, as much as they could be. Oh God, where are you going? I got another Dallas Chiefs meeting, another Tarrant County Chiefs meeting, another Denton County, another Collin County. But this is your chance that you're talking with people that maybe sit next to you in your command unit or at your EOC. How important is that ahead of time for you guys to get this stuff worked out?
I think one thing that's really important is to get to know personalities and get to know some of the chiefs throughout the Metroplex. That's really the biggest thing. I think our culture has changed from how we were 20 years ago to how we are today. I think Dallas is viewed a lot differently because of the makeup of our command staff. We embrace new ideas. And although we're large, we can still learn from smaller departments. And we also like sharing with smaller departments our experiences because Dallas is a large geographic area and it has a big population. So we share every time we meet with the chiefs, whether it's a Dallas County or through the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We participate in different exercises. A lot of the guys were also part of Texas Task Force 2, so that was made up of different fire departments. So, but believe it or not, I think that was a reason why we were successful in this tornado because there's several of us that are on Texas Task Force 2 or were on Texas Task Force 2. We've learned and shared experiences. We've responded to Van Zandt County tornado. We responded to the tornado in 2015 and assisted out there. We responded to the tornadoes in Hood County. So we brought all that institutional knowledge whenever the tornadoes hit. Our incident commander, his wildland train's been out on wildland assignments, Justin Ball. Our logistics and special ops chief, he's been out on several Texas Task Force 2 assignments. I was the operations chief, been out on several Texas Task Force 2 assignments, wildland assignments out to California, out to Hurricane Harvey. But these experiences that not only we bring to Dallas, these are experiences that our Metroplex fire departments are also sharing and engaging in. So we bring all this in, we talk about it, we share ideas, we learn from each other. We have this incident. So when we ask for these 14 mutual aid companies to come in, they kind of understand our process. They understand, what we're asking them to do. They understand what staging looks like. We give them a radio. When we ask for dogs, we get some of those from Capel through mutual aid. When we ask for a structural engineer, when we ask for these different things, these participating agencies, they already know how to kind of play the game, and it really helped. And you could really see it play out through this entire event.
Well, and you mentioned it's so, sorry, Terry. It's so, years ago, under former Chief Boago, like when Steve Abreu was there, I know it was we would send companies to Dallas to fill in during funerals and things. And that was such a, I think the first time Terry, our guys pulled up at a Dallas station, the guy said, are you looking for the funerals over there? Like, no, we're here to help cover,
Yeah.
because it just did. That was like years ago, Chicago.
Right.
Chicago's got a great fire department. They haven't called for mutual. I don't think they called for mutual aid October 8th, 1871 during the Great Chicago Fire. I think they, after the Great Chicago Flood and some other things, now through some progressive, leaders, they've got people. They're it's back and forth, just like it is. And I just sit here and think about the three departments we have represented here, how well you guys work together, the planning ahead. And before Terry, I had a question and I can wait for Kelly. I know it looks like you got something. Charlie, real quick, Texas Task Force 2 is in Dallas. So let's talk about that. You've got this event going on. What happened because normally, like if Terry needed, you guys, boom, you guys are on the road, you're up 35 and boom, you're in Louisville. What was going on with Texas Task Force 2 during that event?
Okay, so I'm very glad that you asked that question, because I think this is something that really everybody needs to consider. On the way in, Rudy Vaez, he's the program manager for Texas Task Force 2. He called me. He said, "Hey, we're stood up. If you guys need anything, let me know." But he also understood that we were going to be really busy. He let me know that he was going to be available. I'm a safety officer on the white team on Texas Task Force 2. So when we got together and we started assessing our situation, we went through all our rundown process. So one thing that fire departments have to be really careful with is you have to assess the scope of your activity. You have to scope the resources that you have. You have to look to see how much mutual aid you're getting, and you have to assess if are you going to need those additional resources? Because one thing that you'd hate to do is call for resources that you're not going to need, but at the same time, you don't want to need resources and not have them. So part of setting up the command structure is being organized enough to realize what you need and what you don't need. And one single incident commander couldn't do that by himself or herself. So we needed the help of our OEM that we stood up. We were getting additional intel from them, from dispatch, from guys that were actually going out there and doing searches. So we got together as our command group, our Chief Ball, myself, our Special Operations Logistics Chief, and we said, okay, do we need to bring Texas Task Force 2? What are we looking like? Well, we communicated with one division chief that had area command on the west and the other one on the east. Is there anybody trapped? Are we going to need additional resources? We are resource rich in Dallas, and we do have 2 regional response teams, and none of them were reporting that we had multiple people that were trapped. Now, we had some small injuries, and luckily this was an F3 and we had no fatalities. We were very fortunate in that. So in saying all that, you have to be really careful on how you assess that. We decided collectively that we have them on standby. We have bird in hand, basically. If we need them, we can call them. They've rostered. They're ready to go. But we looked at our mutual aid partners. We looked at what we still had to search. We had grids. We were kind of calculating how much more we needed to search, and we said, you know what, we're not going to need them. Our
think
mutual aid partners were great.
And one of the key things, Terry, I'm sorry, one more time, is so many places out there when they're so used to running, and no disrespect, like the house fire, maybe the multi-department building fire, whatever. When something big happens, they bring all these resources, they have all this stuff staged that they never really end up using. I'm not saying you don't call it, but if you're not coordinated, you're going to end up zapping all your resources. And Richardson's gonna be going, look, we're right in the middle of you. We're right, Chief. We got our own stuff going on here, and you guys have all this. You guys have all that. There's got to be that balance, I guess,
Yes.
that communication between the OEMs. So we're talking resource management is huge,
Right.
especially with calls. I'm saying there's been incidents where I've seen it where they've got all this stuff sitting here, and these guys are like, wait a minute, I could use like 3 of those things that you're not using. So that I think it's key what you said, the communication among Terry. Go ahead, buddy. I'm sorry.
No, I was just we've done a show here where we've talked about the 911 call centers and the dispatchers, and they always have a special place in my heart. I've never been in a PSAP yet that doesn't look wildly understaffed, and I can't even comprehend a 911 call center during an event like this. And so I was wondering what y'all, the experiences that you had in your PSAPs. I know I like what Chief Salazar said, and we actually do some of that here. Is that, you know, I've come to the realization that the call center and our PSAP over there, they're always going to be resource limited when something bad happens. You know, if you go up there and just look at them on a normal day where they're just under normal conditions, you think, it's not that big a deal, right? It's the same thing when they send a dispatcher to ride with a fire truck. They don't do anything all day. And if we send a fireman to hang out and dispatch to see what they do, they don't do anything all day. But it doesn't account for when the bottom drops out like it did in this particular instance. So something that we've kind of done in Louisville, and Chief Salazar alluded to this, and that's kind of, you take a little bit of control of that dispatching, because you know we can all be honest that we have a pretty good beat of what's going on and how it can be mitigated. And unfortunately, sometimes it's hard, I think, on a dispatcher because they're not getting the visual of what your crews are seeing out in the field. So we start modifying a response where we're saying, well, typically we send an engine and a truck on this. We're just going to send an engine because we're doing some triage, some field triage. But I think it's an excellent way to expedite or to get through a tremendous amount of backlog. And I'm sure all three of you could agree, if you looked on that call holding screen, there are calls that are related, addresses that back up to one another or something. And so a quick way to go through there and start really alleviating some of the pressure off of your 911 centers. But do you have any insight on what their situations were?
Yes.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to jump in because every time you mention something, I can tell you just from what we do through, of course, the other Chief Salazar in Communications and Chief Gomez, they're authorized to call in additional help. So they have a short list of people that can be there within 30 minutes if something big happens. So that they actually called in additional dispatchers, because if your call volume is going to go up like that and you're going to be really busy, you can imagine that everybody in the field is taxed as far as resources. Well, how about dispatch? You have to think about them too. And in order for them to manage all those calls that are coming in, you gotta back them up with some kind of resources as well, because now they're having an experience where they're not used to this kind of call volume and they need additional help. One other thing that we did, and we practice this in storms, is to stretch our resources. We also we'll pull a guy off of apparatus and we'll put him on a booster, because wires down, those present hazards, and somebody has to stand there and manage those wires down, because you can have an incident, have virtually no injuries, and somebody walk across a wire and all of a sudden you have an incident. You have your one fatality because of a wire that was down, that was unmanned. So we stretch our resources that way by taking a person off and putting them on these boosters or this extra equipment, and that helps you manage these large incidents.
Perfect. Kelly, you were going to jump in there, bud?
Yes.
Curtis?
One thing I wanted to comment, go back a little bit on what Charlie said about the planning and logistics on the ground, about resource management. During the 2016 tornado, when we actually reached out to Dallas, they had no resources to give us because they were committed to Rowlett. Due to the networking and some of the other opportunities we've had, and we've continued to improve upon those, we actually used a USAR team from Arlington. Arlington Fire came over and integrated with us. So that's a big deal of planning and logistics, knowing where your resource levels are, managing them to the degree you need, maintaining a staging level, but to remember that you have neighbors as well, and they only have so much as well, and what they may be going through. The one lesson we learned back to the communications component from the storm was that high queue volume, what was priority and what was not. We don't have fire department personnel or active personnel like that in our communications center, unlike Dallas, Irving, and a few others. So we have civilian communications. What we've done since then is early on in events, if we see there's going to be some scale to it, we actually send an officer and usually an aide to our communications center to sit at the console with the dispatcher to help them queue and prioritize calls. And as well as Charlie mentioned too, when you get a call volume unrelated to the event, there's still a rest of the city that you have to cover. Somebody has to do that. You have to be thinking, steps ahead of what's going on in the large scale event. So with a fire department personnel up there to do those interpretations of what a queue and what a call in a queue may represent, that's been a tremendous help in our being able to stay efficient with our resources.
Well, Curtis, you had something. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so I was going to key right in on Kelly's comments. You've got to plan way in advance. June 6th, we had some straight line winds and downbursts come into town on our east side. I'm sorry, on the west side, and we had a little kind of a prep to the tornado because we had that whole side of town, just lots of trees down, power lines, not a lot of injuries, but a ton of damage. And we had actually worked before that and said, when we have these high call volume times, we're going to put someone over in dispatch as well. And that works out great to assist them with prioritizing the calls. And hey, these are back to back. These are probably the same calls and things like that. And we got that done really quickly this night, and that helped greatly. And going back to what Kelly was talking about using your resources around town, when the Dallas County Mutual Aid that all of us work under around here, really close where we get our normal mutual aid, is run by the Dallas Alarm Office. Well, you can imagine that night the Dallas Alarm Office, they were a little busy, so they weren't able to really run the mutual aid system like they would on a normal day. So it took those relationships and those text messages from me and one of my assistant chiefs that we just started texting for help to our peers, assistant chiefs and fire chiefs. Next thing you know, we started getting the help. So you've got to have a backup plan and be able to get in. And as it would things would have, our CAD went down right pretty much in the middle of this whole thing. And
oh, good Lord.
One of the assistant chiefs was in the dispatch, and because they saw it coming, they knew this thing was about to go down, started taking some pictures of the screens because you're going to lose all your data. You're going to lose all these calls. So they started taking pictures of screens, working together real quick. And so you had fire personnel in there working with the normal dispatch personnel, and everyone just did a great job. It's all about keeping your head and keeping things organized. But you've got to think ahead. You've got to plan for these what ifs. And that night happened to be, it couldn't happen on a worse night because most of our command staff and off-duty battalion chiefs were all committed, away, sick, injured, or committed in such a way they couldn't come in. So we were very chief thin that night, but we made it work and worked with our mutual aid partners. But you've got to plan way ahead and plan for anything.
Well, it's kind of, we talked about before going on here, the old days with the safety class of the boulder. That's the boulder that rolls down the mountain, that hits a gasoline tank, and that rolls into the orphanage kind of thing. You got CAD going down in the middle. And one of the things I want to mention that you guys were talking about, and they did this a long time ago in Illinois, started the whole MABUS, mutual aid box alarm system. And it's kind of went national. Very, very popular. Terry, you remember we brought it to our area with the box cards, to get everybody to quit, zapping all the resources. And that's what actually led us to the all hazards and the wildland task force and all that stuff. But they did something, guys, years ago that, and forget even the tornadoes right now, that if Garland and Richardson had a couple X-alarm fires going, at the same time, and there was kind of because we set up our run cards to, we'll just reach and grab this. What happens when they've got something going on? Now you're going extra alarms. You're going to the third alarm to grab your second alarm companies, and now let's throw something. You've got a large scale incident going, and when they get to like four bells or whatever or something, they create, it's called, oh God, and I know my buddies from Illinois are going to jump on me. I think it's the disaster box response or whatever. They actually pulled together, guys, a whole nother group of resources from the outside. They would respond to Richardson's headquarters station, let's say, and become your new fire department for all those little things, Kelly, you're talking about. Because what happens is we bring fill-ins, and then most times if you go to a third, then they go to the third, and then you bring more or whatever. And yet they're supposed to be there to help kind of cover the EMS calls and the gas leak calls. Well, when you get to a certain level of alarm and resources are kind of tapped that area, they bring in engines and ladders and a couple of heavy rescues. They bring ambulances and chiefs, and all of a sudden, it's like they unzip and they create this whole new fire department to handle all the other stuff. They don't go to the fifth alarm that you got going. They just handle all that other stuff. So now the fill-ins are coming, and they're still going to the extra alarm fire. But you got all these other guys that are running around. And Kelly, when you brought that up, that's something that's worked really well. That we've got people. I know I have 3 questions here. One's from Canada, and two of them from other states that we'll get to in a second. That they don't have the system like we have. You know what I'm saying? They don't have the luxury. Maybe they don't. There's still places where chiefs don't respond. Neighboring departments don't fight fires in neighboring departments because one chief called the other chief a boogerhead like 20 years ago, and they still don't respond to each other's fires and stuff like that. They're not as fortunate. But I thought, what a great idea to have that in place where if you have to, the chief in Richardson, boom, he can go, you know what, hit the mass disaster box. And that brings in a whole new set of resources that become the new Richardson Fire Department and handle all your other calls and let everybody else go deal with that big incident. So I think that's kind of big. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to that. Something that came out of the 2016 tornadoes that I mentioned. That's a North Central Texas Council of Governments had spun up is a chief officer staffing working group. The thought of that is for principally in the quad counties, but it can expand as far as it needs to for these type of responses. One of the greatest needs in a large scale response is, like as Charlie mentioned, is planning, logistic, ICS type positions.
Enough bosses, right?
Yes, sir. It takes a certain amount of experience and knowledge of how working systems work. And it's not to come in and take over specifically any kind of operational thing. But there's no reason a chief officer from Richardson couldn't come in and take our staging. That couldn't come in and help with the position in planning. And this is planned regionally so that we activate this group. There will be chief officers, and it's designed to be either in proximity to the disaster or on duty chiefs that will actually leave their cities to help that aren't involved, that'll help undergird the support mechanisms for the ICS structure. It's pretty exciting.
And it's huge because right there, and Terry, I'm gonna go to you here with this. You remember years ago, you know me, where I grew up, we all helped each other. You'd have yellow fire trucks, green ones, red ones, blue ones, it didn't matter. And that was kind of, you remember what we went through getting help. And we used to bring a lot of bosses to the scene. And I had guys go, what do you bring all these chiefs there for? I'm like, first of all, if you're a battalion chief, God bless you. But if you think you're going to run a Mayday by yourself, you're a fool. You drop a Mayday in right now, you're outmatched. And how many times, Terry, have we sat in the car together with a couple of us? You get a neighboring chief that comes in, comes to Scott Thompson, hey, come here. Or, I used to tell guys, if you're going to come and not bring your bunker gear, then go stand on the curb with a camera and take pictures. but because there's always having a senior advisor, having Curtis come and sit next to me and go, here, take the radio, just handle the radio. Let me think this through. Because Louisville, you've got captains, that a lot of us have chief's aides that drive around, and that's absolutely huge when it comes to having running your incidents administratively and operationally. But to have enough bosses there, I've never run out of things for chiefs to do at a fire at a large scale. I've never, whether it's all right, Charlie, look, I hate to do this. Will you go take care of the media for me? Just go to get them on my HR. Yeah, I got you, Rick. No problem. Curtis, do me a favor. Get these ambulances right. You know what I'm saying? And to be able to turn, like you said, Kelly, and have enough bosses there. It's not that we don't try. God, the hardest working people we have are our firefighters and our company officers. They're great. They know what they're doing. But to have enough people, enough eyes and ears I used to say, to fill in the squares, to start, to be able to turn and have enough people there and I said, plan ahead. I'd rather have enough chiefs walk up and go, you know what, Terry, I think we got it, buddy. Hang on a second. Yeah, we got this. And right. How many times have you sat there listening to your radio going, why the hell aren't they calling us? I mean, we've got people, we could go help, and I just think, Kelly, that's huge. Having enough bosses there ahead of time. Again, our firefighters and company officers, very smart people, hardest working people in the business, but God, to have, to plug in all those spots is big time. Go ahead, Terry.
No, I was going to say that night of the storm, my parents live in Garland. That's where I grew up. But I was texting Mark Lee until I finally got the hint from him, like, leave me alone, we're busy. But I was texting him, just like subtle hints, like, man, it looks bad. And I know Dallas is getting hammered. And like, I'm waiting for him to go, hey, do you have an engine you can send this way? Or do you have? And I'm thinking, hell yeah, we'll absolutely come over there. But he didn't take my bait. But, you know, it
Make sure you have my phone number.
hey, I graduated from Berkner, so I'm familiar with Richardson too. But the other thing to kind of step outside the fire department, because another component of this, and I know we're extremely fortunate in Louisville that we have great inter-city relationships, but you're not going to navigate this incident. And I haven't done anything of this scale, but you're not going to navigate this without some really strong support and some hard work from public services people. And I'm assuming that in this particular instance, all of you, at some point, you got to start relying, because people got to get streets cleared. We've got to get stuff out of the way. We got flat tires on rigs. We got all this kind of stuff. So how did that integrate, and how well did that all work for you as far as getting the resources you needed on that side of things?
If I can jump in on that particular part, one thing that we stood up in order to be able to access roads, uh, we stood up our wildland saw team, our saw module, and they went out. Of course, Louisville, you guys are familiar with that because we partner with you guys all the time. You guys have excellent saw teams out there. But we use a saw module to go out there and help clear the roads. Now, we transitioned into recovery the next day, and we did our primary search, our secondary search, and then we transitioned into recovery with the city. And so they brought everybody in, and of course, they didn't have any incident management training. So you have a lot of directors with public works, sanitation, streets, transportation, you name them. And all these guys are, they're strong headed, but they don't have the experience in management. So Rocky Voss, our emergency management director, he turns around and he looks at Chief Ball, since he was the incident commander of the incident. He said, "Hey, you guys are well organized. Why don't you guys, you know, I know you were IMT out there. I need you to be IMT here." So we were pretty much the IMT team that was out there in the field transitioned to the IMT team in recovery, and that really helped the process. And I'll tell you, from the very first day, we set up 7 teams that went out and started tackling issues, clearing roads, making sure people could get in and out of their, the streets, to make sure that, you restore services. But the first day, they didn't know. We gave them instruction, but they were in a hurry to get out there. They didn't know, how to communicate back with us. So the 214 was very short about their needs, what they needed. By the end of the day, they were on cue. Everything was, they needed something, we provided it for them. And now they're going to go back and get IMT training for their directors. Of course, we won't have another tornado for another 50 years, but at least they're thinking ahead of the game. That's kind of how we manage that. We
Don't
tied them
speak
in.
so soon about that tornado, Charlie.
Yeah, I know. You
Well,
can happen anywhere, right?
let me throw this to you guys. Like I said, Terry and I usually get messages. I got a couple with some questions, and I failed Terry at the beginning to mention the whole hashtag FE talk. That way they go to a certain cache, if you will, and we can get to them. But I think the first one you guys have kind of talked about already. Somebody asked, and again, keep in mind, guys, we've got from the smallest departments to some of the biggest listening, and again, those that are going to see this later, there's a ton that watch this later on when it's as a tape. The first question is, did you guys have to
He meant to say YouTube. It's not a tape, Chief. We don't do tapes anymore. It'll be on the internet. You can actually go and click on it. And
that's like Orny Adams says that someone the Melinda's asking him, do you still print? You still print stuff? You still print? All right. So yeah, and I do still print stuff. Anyway, that being said, so all three of you guys, you kind of addressed this already, but again, we got maybe a single station department all the way up to multiple stations out there listening. Did you guys do anything with callbacks? Were you calling people, even Dallas, was from Dallas with 50 plus stations, 58 or whatever it is, and then you've got you got Richardson and Garland with multiple firehouses. Did you guys was there a mechanism in place to start calling people back?
In Dallas, we have a signal 711, and that's where we bring people back. The only people we brought back were really the management teams, like
Okay.
the chiefs.
Okay. Curtis or Kelly, did you guys?
Yeah, we did. We brought back probably, I believe, 3 crews and got them organized, put them on the street. And then the next morning, we actually held the entire shift over that worked the event and left them on the apparatus and brought the entire shift. And we're only running 40 people minimum staffing per shift, but all new 40 people we brought down and did a fresh secondary search with the K-9 team. So we held over an entire shift for about, I think we got it cleared in about 4.5 or 5 hours.
Okay.
We did hold back those guys when we put fresh boots on the ground to do a complete secondary.
Okay. Kelly?
We even though we experienced the storm in 2015, we do not have the effectiveness that we desire with the callback, and we're working on that right now, so that we can uh, kind of expand or collapse kind of the call areas and also do messaging. It will call either an officers group or chief officers group with instructions on where to report and how to respond, and we can get a reply back so we can do resource management to not overstaff or understaff, but just manage what we have. Again, just like you mentioned, Chief, but it would be great to have another chief officer from somewhere else just to be able to help handle communication. You never run out of work to do at the ICS level. It's just like Charlie mentioned, the ICS forms. I know it's something that your boots on the ground firefighter may not be that familiar with. Your officer levels on apparatus may not want to be involved in, but it is essential to disasters to be able to rebuild your community off of the assistance of county, state, and federal government.
Well, it's like at a high rise. Who wants to do? We just did a high rise class, for a bunch of different agencies. Who wants to do lobby? Who wants to be elevator control? You know what I'm saying? It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, it took forever for us to get people to realize how important RIT is. I'm like, I know if I can't have the initial tack line, primary search of the roof, give me RIT. But why would you not want an assignment where if one of our guys goes down, we're expecting you to go initiate the rescue? But so exactly, it may seem like a mundane assignment, but it's critical, like you said, to what's going on. Here's the other thing, and we've got like so many minutes. We can go a little long if we have to, but we have so much time left. This is something I thought. This is a great question. Great question from Georgia. Okay, family notifications of firefighters, and I mentioned this. I think they keyed off of what I said. Palm Beach County has it in their hurricane, their disaster, that they actually ahead of time get all the guys and gals who are on duty, get their needs for their immediate family already addressed. So now you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry, is my husband or my wife or my kids safe, or are they out of water, or, whatever. Did you guys, I mean, at what point did you think about or have somebody, or was it just natural figure they're going to call their families on their cell phones, especially Dallas, when all over the news they're talking about a station getting whacked, and it's like a line of duty death. You know, there was a city that had two firefighters get killed in a fire. I won't say where, everybody else can figure it out. But one of the wives found out that her husband was killed over Facebook, and with social media now, the media, sometimes we forget we have loved ones at home going, "Is my son or daughter, or my husband, wife okay?" So did you guys? Was there any? I mean, I know there was, but anything out of the ordinary with how you did that, or you just rely on guys to pick up the phone and call and say, "I'm okay"? And I'll throw that to all three of you. Whoever, just jump in
I'll say today's technology with guys' cell phones, there's almost really no need for that. I know Texas Task Force 2, they tell their guys don't communicate. We send out all the communication. So they do have something set up like that when they get out. So families get notifications through text messages and emails, but we don't do that in Dallas because guys use their phones.
there. Okay, and I kind of figured nowadays. I mean, but and Curtis, I mean, you think about it. It's always. I've said it before. They're watching the news, they see something, and they're like, if other people, hey, Tommy, isn't your wife working, or Cindy, isn't your husband working? Yeah. Well, did you just hear what happened? and now you can't get them on the phone because they're out making runs or they're in the thick of it. And there's always that, so I thought it was a good question to throw up there. I thought, just nowadays with phones, if there's anything in place or if it's just, like you say, I think we're pretty good about getting the word out. But Curtis, did you have anything? But
That's exactly right for us too. We didn't have anything in place, and honestly, by the time we got to a point where we stopped and even would think about that, the incident was slowed down where the guys could make contact themselves. And we actually never lost cell service, so that wasn't an issue either. So.
okay, cool. Well, Terry, you know what?
I think
Go ahead, buddy.
that's an outstanding question. And I do, something that we realize happens a lot of the communications processes by cell and even telephone are a lot now by voice over IP. They're not hardwired anymore from out of stations or into station. And that's an excellent question on how to make sure that when you're doing accountability on the ground, if there's any issues, that you don't forget about the families at home.
Yeah, I just, again, like I said, nowadays a lot of it takes care of itself. But I could just picture that. I thought it was a great question because I could picture somebody trying to call their husband or their wife and going, well, they must be in the middle of it and just wanting to make sure everybody's okay. But Terry, did you have something? I had.
Well, I was just going to ask. So I was kind of curious where everybody's at now regarding, because we all key in on that first 24 hours, 48 hours, and we're involved in those tasks, right? But of course, emergency management's focused on from the event, well, pre-event actually, all the way through mitigation, and then obviously the ultimate goal of getting communities back together, getting everyone back up on their feet. So I was kind of curious to know what your thoughts or where you were there. In particular, Chief Salazar, I'm just curious to know, what did you do with Station 41? Are you housing them somewhere else? Do they go in a temporary facility, or where are you at there?
Yes, so the previous storm, it took Station 19 out because of the roof collapse there. And then this storm took out Station 41. So in doing that, and then Station 46, we're going to tear it down and build a new station there. And then we've recently moved some people out of another station that has some structural integrity issues. So right now we have resources spread throughout the city, like trucks and engines double stacked at certain stations. And we contacted dispatch so that they could look at the response time. We have some guys that run some data for us so that we can still provide the adequate response time with those stations out. And Station 41, they're still looking at it. We believe it's going to be rebuilt. I just don't know how fast that'll happen. They're working as you know, they got to go through all the red and make sure they dot all the, it takes a little bit of time. Same thing with 19, same thing with 46s. But our plans are to get those stations built back up and serve the community and provide those services back again. But right now we're doing the best. We didn't take any equipment out. Those stations are closed for now.
Good question. Good thought. Hey guys, we're kind of at the end of things. And what Terry for today, what Terry and I told you the hour flies by, doesn't it? Um,
Wow.
Terry and I, Terry and I usually ask our guests for a couple things at the end here, and if we could go, maybe we start with Kelly, then go Curtis and Charlie. Um, uh, you know, the question would be, I guess, what with everything we're talking about, okay, just disaster management, the big one, tornadoes, whatever it is, what I'm saying, just what we've been talking about the show, and we'll start, Kelly, with you first. What advice would you have? Again, we've got a wide group of people that are watching this, and that will be watching this. What advice would you give from your experiences from this incident and the one you had before that you would give to firefighters, fire chiefs, whatever?
It can happen to you, and be prepared. Meet your neighbors, work with your neighbors, train with your neighbors. You may need them someday, and they may need you. And don't put it off. We always create priorities of different things. This is the one thing when it happens, it's just it is a catastrophic event.
Well, perfect. Terry and I agree. Terry and I are big ones on I think our favorite phrase is think big. It's like think big. Anybody can think small, but think big. If you're always thinking big, you won't get caught short. So, and Kelly, our guest assistant chief, Kelly Miller from the Garland, Texas Fire Department. Kelly, if they want to get a hold of you, if somebody wanted to pick your brain or say, what did you guys do or how'd you get out? What's a good email address for them to get a hold of you? Oh, unmute, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah,
There
they
you
can
go.
contact me at kmiller@garlandtx.gov. So kmiller@garlandtx.gov.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, buddy. Curtis, any advice?
Yeah, plan a lot. And talk with people, reach out to departments that have gone through it, and nothing is too small. And I'll tell you one thing that we didn't realize is that our whole department had trained on the search markings, marking the front of the house in years. Never thought about it until that night we were behind the game. So nothing's too small. Plan. Make sure your partners, your area chiefs are all on the same page, and just like I said, think through the little things. That's get you the most.
Well, you said it, thinking, planning, talking, getting with your bosses. Well, I said it to start the show. When you look at Dallas, Richardson, and Garland, you're going, I'll just say it, and I'm not being naive. For a lot of people, that's the last place you think a tornado is going to go whipping through. You're thinking more, you know, you're thinking more subdivisions out, where it gained some strength and it came into town and it lifted back. I mean, you look at the pictures, the aerial views from the next day, Charlie, from the helicopters. It was like, good Lord. I mean, all of you got big time high rises, shopping centers, residential areas. I mean, you got everything. And it's just not something I think a lot of people, think about. So, Curtis, that was a great point about talking and getting to get with your fellow wizards around you and talking about this stuff ahead of time. So, Charlie, any advice?
Yes, and I'll just some of it is redundancy, but relationships are important with your partners, with your mutual aid. Uh, Plan, and part of planning is also training, and then don't get in this little box where you're just training with the fire service. You have to train with your other partners, with OEM, with public works, with sanitation. Make sure that they have some kind of idea or some kind of plan about expectations, because you don't consider those guys until you need them, and when you need them, they really have never tied in with you. So if you train with them, you bring them in, you kind of, if we have this, then what? And then the other thing, do a little research, watch some of these blogs, and I think the best thing you can do is, if you don't have the experiences, learn from others, pay attention, get on the internet, and just do a little bit of research, and guys will tell you what their problems were. Learn from other people.
Perfect, perfect. And if someone want to get a hold of Executive Deputy Chief Charlie Salazar with Dallas Fire Rescue, good email address.
Yes, sir. Charlie.Salazar@DallasCityHall.com.
Perfect, perfect. And Curtis, I forgot, buddy. Contact info for you too, Chief, if they want to get a hold of you.
It's Curtis, CURTIS .Poovey, POOVEY @COR.gov.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks, guys. Terry, closing thoughts, buddy.
Well, other than telling these three, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I think these are great lessons learned, and that's a lot of valuable information. But I'll just, I'll say that I think we're poised to manage something in this neighborhood or our area, because we do have a lot of those solid relationships. But my hat's off to all of y'all, and I know you have great organizations. You got great people, and I've heard nothing but the best. As far as the stories that come back, and I got some amazing pictures out of Richardson that some guys had plucked off of, I guess, their social media and things like that. But really, some amazing stuff. But anyway, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the insight. It's a lot of valuable, real helpful information.
Well, I just realized something, Terry. You talked about growing up in Garland, going to school in Richardson. You forgot to mention you were a police officer in Dallas. So we got all of our three hosts where Terry McGrath has touched them all. But Assistant Chief Kelly Miller from Garland, Texas, Chief Curtis Poovey from Richardson, and Executive Deputy Chief Charlie Salazar from Dallas Fire Rescue. Guys, thank you so much. I know we stole time from you today, especially lunchtime. What you did was awesome, and Terry and I can't thank you enough for being a part of this. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Stay with us. Don't go off the air yet. We'll get with you in a second. Hey, to our viewers, don't forget about FDIC in April. Start signing up now for the classes. They fill up, especially the breakout sessions are one thing, but if you go to the pre-conference to the hot stuff, sign up now, man. They're filling up. The class I'm doing for Women in Fire, I know that's going to fill up. That's what the small stuff. John Salk and I doing our chief officers. It's the Chief Officer Field Training Program for battalion chiefs and people that run ships. I know that's already filling up. So make sure you get that. Take care. Go to FDIC.com. 36,000 people last year. We'll probably top that this year. Hey, we're all on Facebook and Twitter and all the different social media things. So you can reach out to us. You can join Terry and I each month here, the third Wednesday of the month. Every Wednesday, there's some great Humpday Hangouts with some great people. Gives you a chance to interact with some great fire service leaders and resources. They've always got them here, noon Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern. Don't forget to tune in for the podcasts at night, all through the week. Another great series of shows. But in closing, Terry and I always ask you to please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and especially right now, keep those in our law enforcement family in your thoughts and prayers as well. They're going through another bad spell, and we just want them to know that they're part of our family as well. Lastly, never forgetting means never forgetting. So thank you for joining us. Be safe. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.